My name is Kathy Trevino, 31 years old. The Morrison Family Investment Group meeting felt like walking into a ritual I was never meant to be part of, even though I had attended every quarterly meeting for years. My father's study smelled of old money and older leather, the wood-paneled walls absorbing decades of murmured financial debates and quiet power plays. 23 family members sat around the enormous mahogany conference table, 4 generations of Morrisons, each clutching their coffee cups or tablets like props in a performance they'd rehearsed all their lives. I slipped into my usual seat near the door, close enough to observe, far enough to be forgotten. The meeting opened with the familiar rhythm of inflated egos and selective applause. My brother, Marcus Morrison, custom suit, expensive haircut. The confidence of a prince waiting for his coronation, stood at the head of the table beside Dad. He tapped his remote, and a glowing set of quarterly performance charts appeared on the 70-inch screen. "Excellent returns this quarter," he announced, voice polished like a glass of aged whiskey. "The portfolio is up 17% year over year. Tech sector allocations are performing exceptionally well, and our real estate holdings in Austin and Miami have exceeded projections." Applause rippled through the room. Family members beamed as if Marcus personally printed money in the basement. Dad's proud smile never wavered. Marcus soaked it in. I sipped my water silently, letting their praise wash over him like a warm bath he didn't earn. Not that anyone questioned it. This family adored Surface's titles, suits, watches, polished speeches. Marcus embodied everything they expected a successful Morrison to look like. I, on the other hand, taught 3rd grade. And according to them, that meant I knew nothing about anything that mattered. Marcus clicked to the next slide. "This is what happens when you let professionals manage serious money. Amateur investors get emotional chase trends, make reactive decisions. Professionals understand fundamentals and risk-adjusted returns." Around the table, heads nodded in synchronized admiration. I kept my expression neutral. Inside, something old and tired stirred an irritation I'd learned to press down for years. They still didn't see it. They never had. Marcus's voice shifted. I recognized the tone instantly. This was his big move. Now he said we need to discuss portfolio access going forward. Some family members have raised concerns about others interfering in management decisions. My cousin Jennifer lifted her hand. "What kind of interference?" "Questions about specific holdings," Marcus explained smoothly. "Requests to review detailed performance. Suggestions about allocation shifts. Micromanagement can undermine our strategy." "That sounds reasonable," Uncle Tom chimed in. "We hired experts." "Exactly," Marcus nodded, "which is why I'm proposing a tiered access system. Those with real financial expertise will have full transparency and decision input. Others will receive simplified quarterly summaries." Aunt Rachel frowned. "How do you decide who qualifies?" "Educational background, professional experience, demonstrated investment knowledge." Marcus paused, letting his gaze float around the room before it landed inevitably on me. People followed his line of sight. Cousin Sarah snorted softly. "You mean people like Kathy?" I smiled politely. No offense taken. Marcus smiled as if he'd just validated the laws of nature. "Kathy is an excellent teacher. We all admire her work, but investment management requires a certain level of sophistication." Dad nodded. "He's right. This isn't play money. It requires serious oversight. And serious investors," Marcus added, his voice dripping condescension. "For example, Kathy still drives a 10-year-old Subaru. She banks at Community First. Nothing wrong with that, but she simply doesn't think in terms of multi-million-dollar strategies. Her savings probably total, 20,000, maybe 40. A few chuckles scattered around the table, harmless to them. A knife to me. I didn't flinch. My phone vibrated once, then again, then a 3rd time. I ignored it. Marcus moved on confidently, detailing his rebalancing plans that contradicted nearly every strategic principle that had guided the portfolio's real success for 6 straight years. When he recommended shifting $50 million from tech positions into dividend stocks, I raised my hand for the first time in months. The room stilled. Marcus blinked. "Yes, Kathy," he said, his tone coated in fake patience. "This rebalancing strategy," I said calmly. "What's the projected impact on our 5-year compound annual growth rate?" A few eyebrows rose. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Well, it's difficult to estimate. Approximately," I pressed gently. "If we move $50 million from tech averaging 28% annual returns into dividend stocks yielding 4%, what happens to our performance trajectory?" Confusion flickered. Marcus stuttered something about stability. I continued, we'd be trading a proven growth path for a guaranteed haircut. A few relatives exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus's voice sharpened. Kathy, this isn't fourth grade math. You teach children. You don't understand market dynamics. My phone buzzed again, another vibration, and another. Something inside me clicked into place, quiet, certain done hiding. I interrupted softly. And yet I notice every major investment decision over the last 6 years contradicted your suggestions and performed exceptionally well. Murmurs swept around the table. Dad frowned. Kathy, sweetheart, you're out of your depth. Am I asked, reaching into my pocket. I tapped a number. The room watched as I put the phone on speaker. A man's voice answered immediately. Crisp, professional. Kathy, I received your messages. I've denied the transfer request. Would you like me to review the management structure for your family? Every head turned sharply. Marcus went white. The room froze, and I inhaled slowly. Please do, I said. James Whitmore's voice filled the room like a sudden temperature drop. Kathy, to confirm, he said clearly, I've denied Marcus Morrison's request to transfer $50 million into an unvetted private deal. As always, I'm following your standard approval protocols. Dead silence. No one breathed. Marcus's lips parted, but no sound came out. Dad's eyes darted between me and the phone like he was trying to piece together a language he'd never heard before. James continued, professional and sharp. Would you like me to clarify the management structure for the Morrison Family Investment Group? My heartbeat stayed steady. Yes, please. Certainly. Papers rustled on his end, familiar, practiced. The Morrison portfolio is managed under a contract established 6 years ago. Per those terms, the sole authorized decision-maker for the entire portfolio is Kathy Trevino. All major investment decisions, asset allocations, strategy reviews, and approvals fall under her authority. Jennifer gasped. Uncle Tom muttered something under his breath. Aunt Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. Dad blinked slowly. That can't be right. James continued calmly. I can read directly from the contract if needed. It is signed exclusively by Kathy Trevino as beneficiary and portfolio owner. Marcus exploded. That's impossible. She's a teacher. James sounded almost apologetic. Yes, she is. And she is also, by contractual designation, the beneficial owner of the $200 million portfolio that has now grown to $234 million under her direction. A tremor moved through the table like a quiet quake. Dad's voice cracked. Owner. What do you mean, owner? I finally exhaled. Grandpa left it to me, I said simply. The room fell into a suffocating stillness. Even the air felt heavy. 23 pairs of eyes locked on me, with disbelief, panic, confusion, guilt, all of it. Marcus stared at me like I had transformed into someone else right in front of him. You're lying, he whispered. No, I said softly. Grandpa's estate was divided into multiple parts. You received your trust fund. Dad received the commercial properties. Other relatives received their shares. But the liquid assets, the investment accounts, the stock portfolio, the bonds, that entire section was left to me. Marcus shook his head violently. Why? I held his gaze. Because I asked Grandpa to teach me when I was 16. While you were at frat parties, while Dad was flipping properties. Grandpa and I spent every Sunday studying financial statements and market cycles. He said I was the only one who wanted to learn. Flashbacks flickered in my mind. Grandpa's quiet study, old books, yellowed notes, his patient voice guiding me through balance sheets and company fundamentals. I hadn't thought of those moments in years. Grandpa made me promise not to tell anyone, I continued. He believed the truth would tear the family apart. He wanted me to manage it quietly until I had no choice. And now you think you have no choice? Jennifer asked quietly, still processing every word. Yes, I said. Marcus tried to access $50 million this morning. Gasps echoed. Aunt Rachel stared at Marcus like she had never really seen him until this moment. Marcus's anger spiked in a desperate burst. It was a private deal, a huge opportunity. James spoke again, clinical and merciless. Ms. Trevino, would you like me to share the findings of my preliminary due diligence on the deal? Go ahead, I said. Red flags everywhere, James said. It's a Dubai-based WhatsApp syndication promising guaranteed 40% annual returns. No audited financials. No regulatory filings. Promotional materials featuring rented exotic cars. Classic scam architecture. People around the table stiffened, exchanging horrified looks. Uncle Tom breathed out, "Oh my God." Marcus looked sick. You don't know that, he said shakily. It could have been legitimate. It wasn't, I said gently. And even if it were, you had no authority to touch a cent. He flinched like I'd struck him. Dad finally spoke, voice cracked with confusion. Kathy, all these years, you were the one making the investment decisions. Not Marcus. Not the advisors. I nodded. For 6 years. Every rebalancing, every sector shift, every diversification strategy, every due diligence review, all me. A suffocating wave of realization swept through the room. Jennifer wiped her eyes. The quarterly distributions we've been receiving, the money we live on, that came from me, I said, from the strategy Grandpa taught me to build and the decisions I've made ever since. A tear rolled down her cheek. You shared it with us even though we treated you like... She couldn't finish. I looked down at the polished table surface. I never needed credit. I just needed to protect Grandpa's legacy and all of you. Marcus's voice cracked thin and trembling. But you let us think I was responsible. You let yourselves think that, I replied quietly. No one ever asked. You all just assumed the person wearing the most expensive suit was the smartest. My words landed like a needle popping a decades-old illusion. Dad swallowed hard. Kathy, why didn't you tell us? Because Grandpa warned me it would expose the ugliest parts of this family, I said. And he was right. Tension filled the room, vibrating like a held breath that couldn't be released. James spoke again. Kathy, I'm still on standby if you need anything further. Should I proceed with the Henderson acquisition? The window is closing. Marcus blinked. Henderson. As in Henderson. Medical technologies. You're in that round. Yes, I said quietly. Dad looked stunned. How big is the allocation? 15 million, James said. Whispers erupted instantly. My voice stayed steady. Proceed. Use funds from the overweight healthcare allocation. Done, James said. Will there be anything else? No, I said. Thank you, James. As always, he replied warmly. A pleasure working with you, Ms. Trevino. He hung up. I looked around the table at a family who had, for the very first time, begun to see me. The truth's out now, I said softly. We can finally talk about what comes next. The room felt different now, like the very air had shifted weight pressing on everyone's lungs. 23 faces stared at me with a mixture of disbelief, shame, and something none of them had ever directed at me before. Respect or fear, most likely both. Marcus's face was a storm panic. Anger, humiliation, all churning under the surface as he tried to regain control of a situation already far beyond him. He stood abruptly. You blindsided us, he snapped. You let us believe, no, you wanted us to believe that you were insignificant. I met his eyes calmly. I never said I was insignificant, Marcus. You just never looked past what you thought you knew. Dad whispered, almost to himself. 200 million. She managed all of it. And grew it, Jennifer added, by over 30 million. But Marcus wasn't hearing them. He jabbed a shaking finger toward me. You embarrassed me. You humiliated me in front of the entire family. You humiliated yourself, I said softly, when you tried to steal $50 million for a scam. It wasn't a scam, he shouted, though even he didn't believe it anymore. His voice cracked. I'm not stupid, Kathy. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. That's how scams work, Marcus. They target people who need to look successful. I let the truth land slowly. People who are desperate to be admired. His eyes flinched as if I had struck him. Aunt Rachel swallowed hard. Marcus, that deal would have wiped out a quarter of the entire portfolio. All our distributions, our retirement plans, everything. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The reality crushed him all at once. Jennifer leaned forward, voice trembling. Kathy, if she hadn't stopped him. Her hands shook. We'd all be ruined. The weight of that statement rippled through the room. Uncle Tom set his jaw. So she saved us. Again, apparently. Dad clasped the table, his knuckles whitening. Kathy, you knew. You knew for years what you were doing. While we dismissed me, I finished gently, talked over me, laughed at my questions. Silence. They all remembered. The jokes, the patronizing smiles, the way they patted the top of my head with remarks like, oh, Kathy, you wouldn't understand. Marcus sank into his chair, suddenly small. Why didn't you correct me? He whispered. Every time I gave that stupid quarterly presentation taking credit for your work, why didn't you stop me? I kept my voice steady, because Grandpa asked me to let the family reveal itself naturally, to watch, to learn, to protect the portfolio quietly until the day the truth needed to come out. Marcus stared at me, breathing hard. And today was that day. Yes, I said. Today, when you tried to move $50 million into a WhatsApp investment scam behind everyone's back. His breath hitched. Dad turned slowly toward him. You did what? Marcus's voice broke. I was trying to prove myself. You all see me as the successful one, the leader, the heir. I wanted to show I could bring returns too. Dad shut his eyes. I softened my tone not out of pity, but because the truth needed steady hands. Marcus, wanting recognition doesn't make you a bad person, but risking family wealth for ego, that's dangerous. Marcus rubbed his face, tears gathering at the edges of his eyes. I'm not like you. I can't memorize financial statements, or predict market cycles, or talk to billion-dollar fund managers. I thought, if I could just pull off one big win. His voice cracked. I wanted to be someone the family respects, he whispered. A long, fraught silence. Even the tightest mouth softened, finally seeing the fear beneath his arrogance. Dad leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief. Kathy, how much are you actually managing? In total. The question hung in the air like a blade. I hesitated. This was the last piece of truth they had never imagined. Across all portfolios, I said quietly, including the Morrison holdings. Nods around the table. I inhaled. Approximately $760 million. The reaction was instant. What 700? Oh my God, that can't be real. Even Marcus froze completely, face draining of color. Dad whispered, $750 million. Kathy. Jennifer covered her mouth as tears slid down her cheeks. Aunt Rachel spoke in a trembling voice. You've been managing more money than all of us combined, while teaching children how to read. I like my job, I said simply. Teaching keeps me grounded. Investing challenges my brain. The two things together keep me balanced. Uncle Tom shook his head slowly. I feel like we never knew you, any of us. I looked around at them, faces cracked open, illusions, shattered pride stripped away. For the first time in years, they were actually seeing me. Not the quiet teacher at the end of the table, not the harmless little sister, not the invisible Morrison. Me. I straightened slightly. There was more. The part they all needed to hear. I don't want power over you, I said. I never have. But after today, things need to change. Everyone stilled. What kind of changes? Dad asked cautiously. I met each pair of eyes around the table, one by one, my voice steady, calm, resolute. From this moment on, I said the family no longer has any advisory role in the portfolio. Decisions remain mine alone. Quarterly meetings will continue, but only for transparency. A murmur swept through the room. Marcus whispered, "You're taking everything from me." "No," I said gently. "I'm taking away the illusion, not the money." He flinched. And I continued any unauthorized attempts to move funds, request access, or exploit family assets. I let the words hang. Will permanently end your quarterly distributions. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, unbreakable. Marcus swallowed hard, voice shaking. Kathy, please don't cut me off. I won't, I said, unless you force my hand. He broke eyes, reddening shoulders, collapsing his arrogance, finally cracking long enough for something human to surface beneath it. I'm sorry, he whispered. The first honest sentence he'd spoken all day. I nodded once. Good. Now let's move forward. And for the first time since I entered the study, every single person in the room listened. No one moved. The revelation had cracked something open in that room, and the silence that followed wasn't the cold, dismissive silence I'd lived with for years. This one was different, fragile, uncertain, charged with the awareness that everything had shifted and could never return to what it used to be. Marcus sat hunched over, staring at the polished surface of the table as though his reflection might offer him answers. Dad looked older, like the weight of his assumptions had finally settled on his shoulders. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them stared at me as if I had been a ghost all along and only now materialized into a real person. It felt like stepping into sunlight after 6 years of shadows. I took a slow breath. We need to establish new rules, I said. Clear boundaries. Not just for the portfolio, but for how we function as a family. Uncle Tom nodded immediately, his voice solemn. You've earned that. Dad didn't speak. He couldn't. His eyes were glossy, lost between pride, confusion, and a deep ache of guilt. But Marcus finally lifted his head. His eyes were red but sharp. So what now? He asked quietly. I'm just benched? Cut out of everything. You were never actually in anything, I said gently. You played a role the family expected you to play, but now we know the truth. He looked away, jaw tightening. I tried so hard to be what everyone wanted me to be. I know, I said, and I meant it. But that doesn't excuse risking the family's stability for validation. His voice softened to a whisper. I didn't think I was risking anything. I thought it was a chance to prove myself. Dad let out a broken sigh. Marcus, you're my eldest. I always pushed you to lead. Maybe I pushed too hard. The admission stunned the room. Dad never admitted mistakes, not even small ones. Marcus bowed his head. I just wanted you to be proud. I am proud, Dad said, voice trembling. I always have been. But I should have seen how much pressure you were under. That's my failure. The words cracked something inside Marcus, something brittle that had been holding him together for years. He wiped his face quickly, embarrassed. I stepped in gently. Marcus, you don't have to be the portfolio manager to matter. You can be good at what you do. You're charismatic, great with clients, great in social dynamics. Those skills are valuable. He let out a humorless laugh. Not worth $1 billion. They don't need to be, I replied. They just need to be yours. A long pause. Then Marcus inhaled shakily. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I hear you. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was the beginning of something cleaner, more honest. I stood straighter. Let's outline the rules clearly. Everyone waited. Rule 1. No more unsolicited investment advice unless it's backed with proper analysis in writing through appropriate channels. Nods around the room. Rule 2. Quarterly meetings continue but for transparency only. I present. You ask questions. Decisions remain mine. Fair, Jennifer said softly. Rule 3. No tiered system. No sophisticated versus unsophisticated nonsense. Everyone receives the same information. Relief flickered across the younger cousins' faces. Rule 4. The one that mattered most. Anyone attempting to access funds, influence the portfolio, borrow money, or pursue side deals without approval will lose their quarterly distributions permanently. A shiver ran through the room. Dad swallowed. Understood. Even Marcus nodded, subdued. After a long moment, Dad finally looked at me. Fully, really looked, as if seeing the adult I had become instead of the child he assumed I remained. Kathy, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. The words were soft, clumsy, and rare as snowfall. For years, I criticized your career choice. I thought teaching meant you'd never understand this world. But you've surpassed all of us. I softened. Dad wasn't cruel, just blind. And sometimes blindness hurts worse because it pretends to be love. I never needed your approval, I said gently. Just your respect. Dad nodded slowly, shame flickering in his eyes. You have it now. A silence settled, one that felt less like tension, more like an overdue exhale. Cousin David, the CFO, leaned forward. Kathy, earlier James mentioned the Henderson acquisition. Is that the same company working on next-gen diagnostic AI? It is, I said. He blinked, impressed. They're projected to IPO within 18 months. That could be a 9-figure return. Yes, I confirmed. That's the analysis. How did you get access to their Series D, he asked. Those rounds are private, reserved for institutional investors. Relationships, I said simply. I've been investing in medical tech for years. Built a reputation. Earned trust. David's eyes widened as the reality sank in. You have a reputation in that world. I have a reputation in several worlds, I said quietly. MedTech, AI, renewable energy, cybersecurity. I've made 43 investments in 6 years. 31 are profitable, 8 are early stage, 4 failed. Uncle Tom whistled softly. You're running an entire venture strategy. Yes, I said. Jennifer blinked. You're incredible. I shook my head. I'm just doing what Grandpa taught me to do. At his name, the room stilled again, this time with something softer, warmer. Dad closed his eyes. He would be proud of you. A flicker of pain and love tightened my chest. I hope so, I whispered. For a moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, every member of the Morrison family nodded. Some with guilt, some with newfound admiration, some with the quiet shock of seeing truth where they had once seen only a shadow. I finally exhaled. We all have a lot to process, I said. But this is the start, not the end. I gathered my things, ready to leave. But just as I reached the door, Marcus spoke again, so quietly I almost missed it. Kathy, I turned. Thank you, he said, for saving the family, for saving me. His voice wasn't proud or polished. It was honest. For the first time in years, Marcus Morrison sounded human. I nodded. Go build something real, Marcus. You're capable of more than pretending to be what you think we want. He swallowed hard. I'll try. I gave him the smallest genuine smile. Good. And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving behind an old version of our family and stepping into a new one none of us had ever expected. The hallway outside my father's study felt unnervingly quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath, unsure how to process the fault line that had just torn through its foundation. I walked slowly, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. The carpet muted my footsteps, but not the echoes of 23 stunned heartbeats behind the door I'd just closed. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't pretending to be small. My phone vibrated again, 3 new notifications: investment alerts, updates, a reminder from a medtech founder about an upcoming call. My lives, the teacher and the investor, were already tugging at me, overlapping like 2 worlds that had never been designed to touch. I stepped outside. The crisp air hit my face sharp and grounding. The Trevino Morrison mansion loomed behind me, grand and cold, a monument to money that had defined generations. My 10-year-old Subaru waited at the end of the driveway, stubborn and familiar. I pressed the unlock button, and the car chirped back like an old friend, relieved I was coming home. But before I opened the door, I paused. The sky was shifting to late afternoon gold, casting long shadows across the lawn. For a moment, another memory rose. The smell of old books, the soft glow of a desk lamp, and Grandpa's raspy voice beside me. People will form opinions based on what they see, Kathy. Most never bother to look deeper. Let them underestimate you. It gives you more room to work. I was 16, nervous, anxious, trying to understand why a man worth hundreds of millions was spending his Sundays teaching compound interest to a girl who hadn't even finished algebra. He smiled at me, then soft-tired proud. The world assumes silence means ignorance. Let them. Silence gives you power they'll never see coming. I didn't understand until now how much those words shaped me, how deeply I had lived inside them, how heavily they carried the burden of secrecy. My phone rang, pulling me out of the memory. I answered without checking the screen. Kathy. The voice was soft, tired, familiar. Jennifer. Yes. Are you okay? There was something genuine in her tone. Fear, guilt, maybe even awe. I leaned against my car, letting out a slow breath. I'm fine. We didn't know, she said. About any of it. About you. Or Grandpa. Or what you were actually doing. I know, I said. None of you were meant to know. Grandpa wanted it that way. But still, she whispered, we treated you like you weren't even part of the conversation. Like your opinions didn't matter. I'm so ashamed. It wasn't intentional, I said gently. It was an assumption. One everyone made. That doesn't make it okay, she said. And I'm sorry. For a moment, I let silence settle between us. Not the suffocating silence of earlier, but a softer, more human one. Thank you, I finally said. She inhaled shakily. How long have you been living with this secret? 6 years, I said. Little longer, really, since Grandpa first told me his plans. That must have been heavy. It was, I admitted, but it was necessary. A pause. Then, does this change everything? Yes, I said honestly, but change can be good. Jennifer whispered, I'm really proud of you, Kathy. The words caught me off guard. Nobody in this family had ever said that to me. Not once. Thank you, I said again, quieter this time. We hung up. Inside the car, I sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, watching the mansion grow smaller in the rearview mirror. My phone dinged, twice more an email from a renewable energy founder, another from a cybersecurity firm I'd invested in early. I drove home in silence. The city was alive, cars, rushing people, moving neon signs, flickering against the early evening sky. My apartment sat in a quiet corner of town, modest, warm, nothing about it, flashy or expensive. My neighbors thought I was just a teacher, with a quirky habit of staying up late grading papers. They weren't wrong, just not fully right. When I walked inside, the familiar scent of coffee grounds and old textbooks wrapped around me like a blanket. This was home, not the mansion, not the lineage, not the unearned grandeur of the family name. This, my safe space, my real world. I set my bag down and glanced at the stack of third-grade essays on the kitchen table, slightly crooked handwriting. Colorful drawings in the margins. Misspelled words accompanied by earnest effort. It made me smile despite everything. Teaching had always been my purpose. Investing was my responsibility. Together they made me whole. I opened my laptop. Immediately, notifications flooded the screen. Henderson Medical Technologies acquisition executed. Wind farm consortium proposal, updated documents attached. AI neurology startup request for meeting. Portfolio models recalculated. Distribution schedule finalized. The duality of my life flowed back into place as naturally as breathing. But before I dove into any of it, I grabbed a glass of water and checked my phone one more time. A new message. Marcus. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with curiosity. I opened it. Marcus, I looked up the Dubai deal after everyone left. You were right. It's all over fraud alert sites. I would have ruined everything. Another message popped up immediately. Thank you for stopping me. I know you didn't have to. I exhaled. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking to be reinstated. He wasn't fighting. He was genuinely apologizing. I typed back. That's what family is supposed to do. Protect each other. A pause. Then his final message came. I understand that now. I'm sorry for how I treated you, Kathy. I'll be better. I promise. I believed him not because of his words, but because of the broken truth behind them. I set my phone down and opened the Henderson investment documents, letting the numbers fill my mind, letting the room settle around me. Outside, the city lights flickered against the night sky. Inside, I was just me, the quiet investor, the teacher, the woman my family finally saw without filters, the one Grandpa trusted more than anyone. And now finally, I could live as myself without pretending, without hiding, without shrinking. Tomorrow, the family group chat would explode. Tonight, I worked in peace. Morning light seeped through the blinds, soft and harmless, nothing like the intensity of the day before. I woke up early, habit, not necessity. Years of living two parallel lives had conditioned me to start each day before the world fully stirred. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that made thinking easy. My laptop sat open on the kitchen table, documents strewn beside it in orderly chaos, pitch decks, quarterly reports, my students' assignments mixed with multi-million-dollar projections. Two worlds coexisting, never colliding. I brewed coffee, the familiar warmth grounding me. As it dripped, I checked my emails. A thank you message from the Henderson Medical Technologies team. A request for a meeting from a biotech founder. A detailed follow-up from the Wind Farm Consortium. An invite from a private AI equity circle. 3 messages from parents asking if I could rearrange tutoring schedules. Normal, all of it. I sat down, sipping my coffee, absorbing the calm before the aftershock, because I knew what waited for me the moment the family woke up. The group chat would become a battlefield, questions, apologies, demands, confusion, maybe even anger. But instead of dread, a quiet confidence settled in my chest. Yesterday, I had stepped into the role Grandpa prepared me for. Today, I would choose what to do with it. Before I opened my laptop fully, I walked to my bookshelf. One section held textbooks and binders from my years teaching. Another held something older, worn, and precious, Grandpa's ledgers. His annotated financial journals, the handwritten notes he made on every sector analysis from 1975 to 1999. I pulled out the leather-bound journal he gave me on my last Christmas with him. The spine cracked softly as I opened it. Inside the front cover was his final message to me, written in shaky pen strokes. Kathy, wealth is a tool. Knowledge is responsibility. Character is destiny. Use all 3 wisely. Grandpa. I closed the book, gently breathing through the swell of emotion. He had trusted me with everything. And yesterday, after years of hiding, I had finally honored that trust openly. My phone buzzed. Dad. A long message this time. Kathy. I barely slept. I keep replaying everything in my head. I raised you and still failed to see who you'd become. I'm proud of you. Truly. Maybe for the first time, I see you clearly. Lunch today. Just us. No money talk. I want to know my daughter again. I let the words settle. For Dad to admit failure? That was monumental. I typed back. Lunch sounds good. And you've always known me, Dad. You just never knew the whole story. He responded instantly. Then help me learn it. A softness warmed my chest. One relationship healed. Not perfect, not fixed, but healing. Another buzz. Marcus. Morning. I know things won't go back to normal overnight, but I'm going to therapy today. I need to understand why I needed everyone's validation so badly. Also, I talked to my firm. I'm stepping back from anything client-facing until I sort myself out. I want to become someone who earns respect, not demands it. I blinked at the message. Mark is taking accountability. That wasn't just progress. That was transformation. I typed back. I'm proud of you. Take your time. You don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. He sent one more message. I don't want to lose you again. You're my sister. I want to be better at being your brother. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the moment wash over me. One more relationship, shifting, softening, finally honest. After responding, I turned to my laptop and reviewed the Henderson projections. My fingers moved instinctively across the keyboard notes, red flags, optimistic projections, competitor analysis. Financial strategy had always been a language I understood better than most social cues. It still amazed me sometimes that I could be two people at once: the quiet teacher who smiled at misspelled essays, the woman balancing $750 million with surgical precision. But both versions were me. Both needed each other. A soft knock startled me slightly. No one ever knocked at this hour. I opened the door. It was Mrs. Ramirez, one of my older neighbors who always brought plants to my doorstep. She held a small pot now, white jasmine. "For you," she said warmly. "You always look tired in the mornings. Plants help." I smiled, taking it. "Thank you. I love jasmine." "You're a good girl," she added, patting my shoulder. "The building is lucky to have you." She walked away before I could respond, but her words lingered. People in this world appreciated me without knowing anything about my money. People in the other world admired my money without ever knowing me. I was finally beginning to find the bridge between both. I returned to my desk, jasmine beside my laptop. The world outside my window was waking up, cars humming. Sunlight gathering on rooftops, people leaving for jobs, errands, lives. I opened one last email. It was from Catherine Shin, the venture partner. "Kathy, our consortium is confirmed for the Texas Wind Project. We'd love to have you anchor the round. Also, a private circle is forming for long-term impact investing. Your voice would be invaluable. Let me know if you're in." I sat back. Impact investing. A strategy Grandpa once told me was wealth with purpose. Maybe it was time to take on something bigger. Not louder, not flashier, just more meaningful. I typed a simple reply. "I'm in. Send the details." Then I closed the laptop, letting the quiet return to the room. As I stood to start my day papers, to grade lunch with Dad, a future that felt strangely clearer, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Alignment. For once, the worlds I lived in weren't fighting each other. They weren't secrets. They weren't masks. I was simply me. Kathy Trevino, teacher, investor, quiet guardian of a legacy that would outlive all of us. I walked to the window, watching the sunlight reflect off the city I'd quietly influenced from behind the scenes. And for the first time, I understood something Grandpa had always known. Power doesn't need an audience. Wealth doesn't need applause. Legacy isn't about who sees it, it's about who it protects. I smiled softly. Tomorrow, opportunities would rise. Companies would innovate. Families would argue and heal. And I would keep balancing these worlds quietly, deliberately, with the strength of someone who no longer needed permission to exist fully. The world moved, and I moved with it.